Thanks, everyone. So I'm really excited because the four panelists that we have with us today are really luminaries, I think, in the field of starting to think about what is data fusion, which we'll try to figure out by the end of this panel. But more importantly, how this applies in terms of how we approach audiences and really activate those things and make those things a reality. So I'd like to invite all of them to the stage. So first, Bob Carrigan, who's the president and CEO of Dun & Bradstreet, the world's leading source of commercial information and insight on businesses. He was previously CEO of IDG Communications and someone that we work with extensively, particularly around the B2B space. So Bob. And next up, someone who certainly doesn't need any introduction, Irwin Gotlieb, who's the global chairman of GroupM, pioneering how most of this stuff works. I'll just stop there so we can kind of get to it. Next is Alexander Hooshmand. He's the vice president of product management for the Oracle Marketing Cloud. He leads the product management teams focused on the BlueKai DMP, cross-channel marketing with Eloqua, and content marketing with Compendium. And before joining Oracle, he was the co-founder and chief product officer for BlueKai prior to that acquisition. So great to have him with us as well. And then last is George Pappachen, who today is the executive vice president for strategy and business development at Kantar, who I've had the pleasure of knowing through a number of stints, previously at WPP's Data Alliance, where he served as the global strategy and business development director, as well as chief privacy officer for Kantar. So George, please come on. So to start things off, Irwin, much has been made of the industry's transition to audience-based buying approaches, particularly around programmatic. Why is it so important that advertisers use the right set of data? And critically, what does the right set of data even look like in the first place?
Okay, so audience buying isn't anywhere near as new as most people think. The moment we went to reach and frequency optimization tools in the mid-late 90s, we switched from buying context to buying audience, right? We came to the conclusion that it was more important to reach the right people than reach people who are watching a specific program. That was done systemically. The word programmatic wasn't in the lexicon yet. But it doesn't really mean anything different, okay? I think someone once said that the opposite of programmatic isn't premium, the opposite of programmatic is manual, right? So we start there. When you make decisions on the basis of the data that's available, you've got to make sure you're using the right data. And you've got to make sure that, that you're selecting targets intelligently. And by the way, you know, I keep reminding people that the difference between 2015, 2016 now and 10, 15 years ago is that 15 years ago we were simply in the business of creating awareness for clients. Whereas today, we're in the business of pushing people right through the marketing funnel. And we're not suggesting in any way that the top of the marketing funnel needs to be narrowed. It needs to continue to be broad. But at each level of the funnel, you get more selective to capture the cheapest path to a customer acquisition or a sale, right? To an outcome. And the consequence of that is that you need to know what the right target is, what the right segmentation is, and it has to be defined very, very cautiously. And we'll get into a lot of that, I'm sure, in the course of this discussion.
Great. And I think that dovetails really well. You know, George, Kantar sits on an enormous set of data from a variety of sort of backgrounds. What are the key types of data advertisers really need to be looking to acquire as they start to build something that is more comprehensive, not siloed, and you know, a good 360-degree view of a customer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of this is driven by objectives. So, as Irwin said, I don't think advertising was ever just about one or the other. It was more about what's available within, what are the resources available. So at Kantar, we take a lot of different perspectives depending on the client. We have a paradigm that says, what somebody bought and work backwards, so what's been bought and why. And everything can build that story. So, purchase data is certainly important. Media data is important. There's a number of data points that are important. I think it's all driven by objectives. I'm pushing more and more for reference data to be an important aspect of this. Over the last decade or so, as audience-based buying has become more prolific, we've had to sit back and say, how do we enter all of this activity into the traditional view, into the classic view of what moves the needle? So things like ad clutter, things that are competitive intelligence, how do we attach that to the existing data points? So I wouldn't say any one data set is necessarily more important than the other. There are data sets that become more important as you move down the funnel. As Irwin said, as the consumer journey progresses towards purchase, obviously there are data sets that become more important there versus earlier in the funnel.
Yep. And so I think that's a great point, that it's not everything is going to be the same depending on where you are in that funnel. And you need a system to really kind of be able to manage that. And Alex, I think you coming from BlueKai now being in an Oracle where a lot of this is starting to come together, what are we really looking at when we think about marketers sort of putting together these systems to manage data? What are the big things that we need to be sort of thinking about as advertisers start to move towards this much more kind of technological focus?
Yeah. So to go back to the concept of a funnel, I actually break that funnel into two separate parts. There's what I call the pre-sales funnel, which traditionally has been the realm of, I would say, advertising, and then sort of the post-sales funnel, which traditionally has been the realm of marketing or marketing technology. And I think today there's really two different platforms that are the unifiers of data for those two different parts of the funnel. For the pre-sales funnel, it's primarily the data management platform, I would say. Obviously, there are other platforms that can deal with the data too, but I would say today primarily it's the DMP. And then for the post-sales funnel, it's typically your marketing automation platform or some form of CRM database, or some form of those two things combined together. And I think the interesting trend that we're seeing more recently is those two parts of the funnel coming together. So how do you actually make the DMP and the CRM and the marketing automation platform all work together seamlessly to drive the user from the awareness stage all the way down to a loyal customer, hopefully in a profitable customer. So that's sort of a big trend in my mind.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about systems, about sort of unifying funnels, unifying these data sets. Bob, Dun & Bradstreet really focuses on going incredibly deep on a very important area of data of a person's life around, especially kind of professional data. But you've done a lot of work in terms of sort of connecting that to the other important data points and creating these sort of portraits of users. Why is it so important that clients build this sort of unified view of a user, no matter sort of where they lie in terms of their various data points and stages of life?
Yeah, so we think about kind of a broader master data management approach, connecting ad tech to marketing tech. So many of our customers are trying to connect that engagement through the entire funnel, from advertising into CRM integration. And we do that through leveraging common identifiers. We're not trying to solve through common systems, but using data as the connective tissue. So we have this thing called the DUNS number, which is kind of a social security number for business, which companies are using as a key organizer across their various marketing systems. And we've taken all of our offline data and have onboarded it, and essentially now you can connect those cookies with DUNS numbers from programmatic targeting, and as they make it into your CRM, you can connect those. So that's that more holistic, single, complete, and actionable view is really what we're hearing our customers need, thinking about how to connect offline and online and how to engage with customers through the entire funnel.
So, Irwin, you've talked a lot about sort of data asymmetry, right, and how we're starting to be able to approach this in a much broader way. So, sort of based on this kind of unified view of the user, how does this really start to provide advantage across multiple media buying platforms, right? We know this, it's not simple enough to do it in one place. You've got to be able to take it everywhere.
Okay, so this sort of gets to the heart of the question about fusion, right? By the way, I thought we were talking about cuisine fusion. This is an Asian fusion restaurant we're in, right?
I'm sure that was planned.
It was planned, yeah.
That's right.
So I think this is obvious, but I'm going to state it anyway, right? Because everyone's touched on it in the last minute. But the core issue here is that we have incredible proliferation of data sources. And we're at CES here, and we're looking at more and more data sources developing every moment, right? A smartphone today has 11 sensors built into it. We're looking at wearables. We're looking at sensors in every device. We're looking at every piece of hardware and every appliance in the home, sending back some sort of data stream. These data streams, in and of themselves, can be quite meaningless. I mean, let me put it in the simplest terms. Knowing that a potential customer showed up at a laundry detergent website doesn't really tell me if he's a client of that particular detergent or someone else or got there by accident, right? It just doesn't tell me anything. But if I can match that up to actual purchase behavior, now I have something, right? If I can determine the purchase cycle, I have more. If I can match it to viewing behavior on television, now I've got a bit of a story, right? If I can determine whether they own the home that they're in or rent a home and what their family size is, that becomes even more interesting, and on and on and on, right? And one day I'll have a sensor that tells me how much they're sweating so I can predict how much detergent they're going to use. I just made that up, but you get the idea. Data becomes more powerful when it's conjoined, because the proliferation of data sources today is such that at best individual data sources are merely interesting.
Yep, I think that's great, and actually kind of leads into, I want to go back a little bit to this point where not only can data sets be meaningless on their own, but pretty much are always incomplete, right? There's latency, it's an incomplete view of a customer, it's the shifting nature of consumer behavior, and so this is kind of for everyone. You know, modeling becomes a really...
We haven't even touched on the issue that there are a few walled gardens out there
right.
that become obstructive to that holistic view.
Right. So in the light of all this, and you know, this is kind of open for everyone because I think it touches on everyone's kind of core competencies, you know, what is the role, you know, data sets themselves are relatively intuitive, right? A data point about, you know, while meaningless, you still sort of understand them. It's when we get into sort of proximity modeling and application of data science that things start to get a little bit more confusing. How important is it for advertisers today to really understand this, not only in terms of application, but in terms of how it's being applied?
I'll start. From my perspective, there is too much for anybody to grasp by themselves or on their own. So I think, you know, partnerships are not just important to join data together, it's also to join understanding together. And the knowledge that you build up over time needs to be included into these new data streams that come in for it to reach its maximum impact. So at a concept level, it's very important, but how is that possible? I think, you know, you have to come back to some reference points